What up there, Brian?
Hello. Been a while, my guy. How you been?
Great. How was Slovenia?
So Slovenia was interesting. It was nice, beautiful country. That Slovenia is small. I think it's probably the size of Detroit. There's 7.5 Slovenias that can fit in the state of Michigan, and there's
Wow.
2,000 wineries in the country.
Oh, Jim is on.
75% of the country makes white wine. And they're on the 46th parallel, which makes them comparable to our climate.
Whoa.
But you can ski in the Alps in the morning, drive 3 hours, and swim in the Adriatic in the afternoon, which is, near Venice and the northeast side of Italy. So it's that small of a country.
Wow.
The number of wineries just blows my mind, though. But the largest one that I saw out of all the wineries and all the wines I tasted, the largest production was like 6,000 cases. It's like the size of two lads.
Whoa. No, but no, I saw your pictures and everything, and it looked very, very, very beautiful. Um,
Very lush, very cool place. Frankly, I think we were there too long because we were in Croatia for 2 nights, and then we were in Slovenia for 10 nights in 3 different cities. And there's just, like I said, it's the size of Detroit, and there's a lot to do in Detroit, but there ain't a whole lot more to do in Slovenia. Especially
Hey,
in
Jim.
November.
Okay, we got your camera. Now you turned your mic off. You got to turn your mic back on. There you go.
You can hear me?
I can hear you. I can see you.
It's so weird. It says mute. And when I went unmute, you said you couldn't hear me. So
Right.
crazy. Okay.
No, well, it's good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you too, Chuck.
Yeah.
So I'm up here on the top and you're in the big middle of my screen here.
It depends on who has it, because I'm like the host.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
okay.
so I'm generally going to be center screen. Right now, you're on the bottom of my screen. So
okay, I'm on the top of my screen.
Right.
And there's another gentleman to my right.
Yeah,
Brian Lillie.
That's Brian Lillie.
Brian Lillie. All right.
Hello.
Are you related to Bruce Lillie?
I don't believe so. Probably not spelled the same way. Lillie.
Oh, no, yeah, he's Lilley, I believe.
Yeah,
like the drug company.
I mean, we could be distance.
Yeah.
I work sometimes with an anthropologist, and she always says that if you go back 50 generations, we're all related somehow. So
yeah, my last name has a number of spellings as well. So I mean, Lester is Lester, but if you go to England, it's Leicester.
Interesting.
So yeah, and Lister, Lister. If you go back far enough, it's the same name. So
okay.
And Listers were people who were textile people in England, in Old England. And in particular, they were people who were experts at dyeing the cloth with various herbal dyes and whatnot. And that was the name of their craft. If somebody said, "What do you do for a living?" they'd say, "I'm a lister."
There you go.
I'm a dyer of cloth. So
yeah, it's anyway, like a cooper or a blacksmith, exactly. The same last name.
Yeah. Well, I don't dye cloth, but sometimes I stain my teeth with red wine.
So. Cheers to that.
Most definitely. First big question, sir. Do you prefer Jim or James?
I go by James professionally because it sounds more formal. My male friends tend to call me Jim, and my female friends tend to call me James. So I go by either one.
Okay. Awesome.
It's
Awesome.
like you, Chuck. Are you Chuck or Charles? You know, it's like
Well, my birth name is Charles.
your
I
mama
get
probably calls you Charles when you're in trouble.
generally,
Yeah.
generally. And the only people that call me Charles are the people I went to elementary school, junior high school, and high school with. Because
Yes.
the minute I went to college, they asked me at the college, what do you want to be called? I said, Chuck or Chucky. And for 4 years, I was Chuck and Chucky.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Same here.
always
Um, as they always say, you can call me anything, just don't call me late for dinner.
amen, amen to that.
That's right.
Uh, first, a statement. In all of my years of tasting wine and specifically tasting Michigan wine, um, there's a in in the rap community they talk about your top five rappers.
Yes.
I have a top five winemakers in
Okay.
Michigan,
Okay.
and you are number one on my top five.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
No pressure.
Well, that's an honor. Thank
and
you.
it is first and foremost, it's because of your wine. Second is because of I remember I think I first met you at the Grape and Wine Council industry tastings at the Rattlesnake,
Yes. I believe that's
and when I met you for the first time, I just felt like we were old friends for 10 years already.
correct.
The way you
Hey,
immediately just started talking and pouring wine for me and everything, and giving me the 411 on what you were doing. And all I can say is when I finally came out to visit and was just blown away by your property and what you're doing, I talked to as many people, and Brian will attest to it. Andre Houston Mack is a nationally known sommelier, but he has really bad things to say about Michigan wine. And the first thing I wanted to say was, you've never tasted anything from Wyncroft Marland.
well, thank you. Yeah, well, that's a little bit of uh, a road bump that we've got to get over. Is that for years and years and years, Michigan was known for making sweet swill for the I-94 crowd, and unfortunately, we still do that. But there's a fistful of us who recognize that Michigan has a unique geographical location capable of making world-class wines. And uh, I realize that I'm a native of Seattle, Washington, and I came out here to work on my master's degree, and I decided not to continue with that and ended up staying here instead of moving back to the West Coast. And I got interested in fine wine, and I was very fortunate because I had bumped into a gentleman who became my wine mentor, and his name was Dr. Maurice Schwartz. And Dr. Schwartz was a tenured chemistry professor at the University of Notre Dame and was an internationally known theoretical chemist. And he decided he liked me, and he was 10 years my senior, but he would invite us over for dinner after church on Sunday or something, and we'd go over there, and he'd say, well, I'm going to go out and, harvest some herbs for dinner. And I'd say, herbs, you have herbs. Where do you in my backyard? And I thought, whoa, this guy's serious. He grows his own herbs. So we went out to the backyard, and he's snipping away, and he's having me taste different little herbs that he's growing. And he says, okay, so we need this for this part of the dinner, and we need this for the other part of the dinner. And I thought, okay, this guy, you know, he's not just some kind of backyard hobbyist. He's serious. And then he said, okay, so we've got dinner, and I think we should go down to the wine cellar and pick out a wine to go with dinner. And I said, okay. He says, you want to come down? I said, okay. And he took me down in his basement and walked into this little room. It was all dark in there, and he had a flashlight, and he's flashlighting around, and here we are. He says, here. And he pulled out a dusty bottle of 1978 Chateau Margaux. And yeah. And he says, okay, he says, this is what we're having for dinner. I had no idea. So he said, I actually bought this particular bottle when I was in Bordeaux. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He says, let's take it up. He says, see the picture of that house on the label? I said, yeah, that great big, yeah. He says, that's actually the house. That's the chateau.
Right.
It's like a 5-story house, with, 15 bedrooms and 15 baths. And, and I go, wow, this is amazing.
Right.
And he says, yeah, let's go upstairs. I've got a big coffee table book I want to show you. So we went upstairs and he picks out this great big coffee table book. The Great Wines of Bordeaux is the title. And he opens it up and here's this big color plate picture of Chateau Margaux photograph. And on the other side, the date the chateau was established, who built the chateau, the whole history of the place. And then it went into the details about the soil types that were there in the vineyards and what percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon was planted, what percentage of Merlot was planted. And Maurice said, yeah, we rode our bicycles right up that driveway and knocked on the front door. And they spent 2 hours with us in the wine cellar pouring us wine. And this bottle of wine, this 1978 Chateau Margaux, is one of the bottles I bought when I was there.
Right.
Well, he's got me. Okay, I'm going, wow,
Wow.
this is too cool. I'm going to get a chance to taste a bottle of wine that you personally went to France and brought back to the United States. And you're showing me the picture of this house and this property. It's like 400 acres, And I was just like, wow, this is too cool. So I took one sip of this wine and I was instantly in love. And I'd never tasted wine in my life. Okay. I was almost 30 years old. And I come from a very conservative, very conservative Christian background. And my mother was a complete teetotaler. She believed that wine came from the devil. And so I'd never tasted anything with alcohol in it in my entire life. So my very first taste of wine was this beautiful classified Bordeaux wine. And I instantly fell in love with it. I thought, this is the most amazing thing I've ever tasted. So Maurice was excited to see that I was excited. And so he took it upon himself to I became his student. And he handed me about 4 or 5 books to read about wine. And I devoured them in a week. And that's what turned me on to the world of fine wine, was that experience with Maurice and having that great Chateau Margaux at dinner.
Wow.
And finding out, wow, this is really amazing. I want to learn more about this. I come from a long line of plant people. My family are all avid gardeners. So I grew up with gardening tools in my hands, and so I knew how to grow things. And as I'm looking at the vineyards and reading about the vineyards, I'm thinking, wow, what I just tasted came from plants. Well, I know about plants. I know how to grow plants. And so I started looking around. I saw there were vines growing all over Southwest Michigan. Mostly everything was Concord grapes, but
Right.
obviously grapevines liked Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, why isn't anybody growing Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and these grapes that make this great wine? And so one day I was driving, it was a beautiful fall day in 1983, and I was driving around Southwest Michigan. And I came around the corner and there was this gentleman coming down a row of grapes on his tractor, and he hopped off his tractor and was doing something. And I waved at him and he waved back. So I pulled over on the shoulder and I walked over and introduced myself. And I said, well, my name is Jim Lester. I'm interested in grapes and I just got interested in wine. And I thought maybe you could answer a few questions for me. And I said, I see that these are Concord grapes, and he says, yeah, that's right. And I said, well, those are made for juice. And, I'm interested in, is anybody growing Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot or any of these, Bordeaux varieties? Oh, no, he says, they won't grow here. And I said, oh, really? He says, yeah, he says, it's too cold in the winters and, they just don't grow here. So that's why we grow the juice grapes. Well, Maurice had given me a book about American wines, and I read in this chapter about American wines. And of course, most of it was about the West Coast and what was happening in California at the time, which was in the early days of the California wine industry. But there was one chapter dedicated to fine wine regions other than the West Coast. And this particular writer made a big deal about this guy named Dr. Constantine Frank, who was in the Finger Lakes of New York.
Yep.
And he went on and on about this guy being a viticultural genius and how, he was the very first person to succeed at growing Vitis vinifera east of the Rockies since Thomas Jefferson tried and failed at Monticello back in the 1700s. And I thought, okay, I'm a plant guy. I got to talk to this guy. How did he do that? How did he know how to do that? So I called him up. That was back in the days of long distance, right? You remember long distance, Chuck?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I spent 2 hours on the phone talking to Willibald Frank, Constantine's son, because Constantine had passed away a few years earlier, and Willie had quit his job at Eastman Kodak and took over the family business. But he'd grown up, working with his dad in the vineyards and everything, so he was very knowledgeable.
Right.
I spent 2 hours on the phone with Willibald Frank. That phone call cost me $85. But it might have been the best $85 I ever spent.
Sure.
Willie, told me all the story about growing up with his father and learning how to grow these vines.
Right.
So I thought, okay, I've hit the jackpot. And then Willie said, I've got, I said, well, where do I get these vines? And he says, well, I've got a nursery right here at the vineyards. I said, what? He says, yeah. He says, I propagate the vines that my father brought back from France. And he said, all the ones that died in the winter, we discarded those, but the ones that survived and made the best wine, those are the ones we kept. And I propagated those.
Wow.
So I'm thinking, man, this guy's, he's 20 years ahead of me. I'm going to ride on his wave,
Definitely.
So I said, well, how much are the vines? I'm figuring they're going to be like $100 a piece, right? These are so rare. He says, they're $2.50. And I said, what? And he says, well, it takes 800 to 1,000 vines to make an acre of vines. And he says, I'm not trying to make any money at this. He says, I'm just trying to give my guys something to do during the winter months when there's nothing to do in the vineyard. So they propagate vines in the winter. So I have this little nursery, and I said, can I buy these vines? Oh yeah, you can buy the vines. So that's how I got my start. I bought 12 vines of 7 different grape varieties from Willibald Frank and planted them at a friend's farm in Galeen, Michigan, which is not too far off the lake in southwest Michigan. And the deal I made with my buddy was, you take care of the vines and I'll make the wine and I'll give you half the wine from the grapes. So that's actually how I got started. Was just a little tiny hobby vineyard and just having this crazy notion that, hey, I know how to grow plants. I can make this work. If Constantine Frank can do it in New York, I can do it here in Southwest Michigan.
Most
and that's really how I got started. I mean, and that was 1983.
And were you in contact with anyone up north here in Grand Traverse Bay region, like Eddie O'Keefe or
the only person up north that was even worth talking to at that time was Ed Sr.
Yep.
Ed O'Keefe Sr. And Ed had gotten started in the late 70s, and I was getting going in the early 80s, so I was just a few years behind him. But somebody gave me his name, and I started talking to Ed. Ed was encouraging, but I figured. I was pretty confident in my ability to grow plants. So I thought, okay, the first thing is I've got to master how to grow these vines here, just like Constantine Frank had figured out.
Right.
And so that's how I did it. I just started doing that and then making little batches of wine in my basement off the grapes that I was growing. And then in 1980, this was 83 when I got, 1983, I made my very first Pinot Noir. And it was the first red Pinot Noir ever made in the state of Michigan. I still have a bottle of it in my cellar. And I made 9 bottles of this wine. And I literally squeezed the grapes by in between my fists into a salad bowl to press it, because I didn't have a press small enough to press that little tiny amount. But I made a Pinot Noir that year in 1983, and when I was racking the wine out of the little jug, this perfume started coming out of the jug, and it smelled just like a French Burgundy I'd recently had. And And I called my friend Maurice Schwartz, Dr. Schwartz, up, and I said, Maurice, I just racked this Pinot Noir and it smells like Burgundy. And he goes, good for you, Jim. I'm glad you're excited. You know, and I said, no, really, it does. It smells like Burgundy. And he goes, I'm glad you're excited, Jim. Good for you. You know, so a year later, I bottle it up, you know, put it in my cellar. I even made a little press type, you know, where you had the rub-on letters. I made a little label out of rub-on letters and ran them off on a copier and scissored them out and stuck them onto the glue stick, you know. So I had a really official looking bottle of wine, you know, and I put a capsule on it and the whole thing. So I mean, it looked like a finished bottle of wine, even though I only had 9 bottles of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an artistic kind of guy. I did my own graphic arts, and you know, so Maurice invited us over for dinner about a year later, and I said, "Hey, Maurice," I said, "can I bring a bottle of that Pinot Noir I was telling you about over?" He says, "Oh yeah, sure, bring it along." So I get to his house and I open the wine and I pour it in a glass, and he looks at it and he goes, "Wow, that's really a beautiful Pinot color. You know, it's really clear, really nice." He stuck his nose in the glass and he's quiet for a minute. He sets the glass down on the table and he goes, "Oh my." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, taste it." So he took a sip, sets the glass down, and he goes, "You made that wine?" I said, "Yeah." "From Michigan grapes?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "That's fantastic." He says, "You're right. It does taste like a Burgundy." And right then and there, I decided I'm staying in Michigan and I'm going to make wine in Michigan.
There you go.
So that's how I got started. It was that simple. You know, it's like my first try making, you know, Pinot Noir, of course, is one of the most difficult wines to make in
Mm-hmm.
the wine world. And my very first red wine was Pinot Noir, and it was enough to impress my wine mentor, Maurice, who had an excellent palate. So I thought, you know, it wasn't because I figured I was some kind of genius. It had to be the quality of the fruit we can grow here in Michigan. So that's what I realized. Okay, you know, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a winemaker. And that's how it all started way back then.
Wow.
Now, I've never, you know, I come from a family with no money. My mother was a school teacher and she was a single mom. So, you know, everything I've got in this business has been, you know, hard won bootstrapping, you know. And then a few people came along to help me out here and there in my little career. I only make 3,000 cases of wine a year.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm probably the smallest winery in Michigan. But if you go to downtown Chicago and you talk to all the top restaurants in Chicago, you talk to all the top chefs in Detroit, they all know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to the bottom I went to the very top of the restaurants because I figured of all the people on this planet that would understand what I'm doing, it would be the people at the top. And so I got my wines in it at the Lark with Jim Lark. You know, he was very skeptical, but when he tasted the wine, he's going, "Oh my God, I need about 5 cases of this." And I said, "Well, I got him in the car."
Mm-hmm.
So I got into the Lark, which at that time was like the top restaurant in all of Detroit.
Yep.
And then Jimmy Schmidt at the Rattlesnake Club, you know, he jumped on it. I mean, it was just like I got into every one of the top restaurants in Detroit. And I did the same thing in Chicago. And it wasn't because, it wasn't because I think I'm a genius. It's because of the quality of the wine that we were able to produce, you know. The grapevine has no idea whether it's growing in France or whether it's growing in Michigan. The grapevine doesn't know. What it does know is, did I have the intelligence to plant it in a place that's in sync with its natural biological clock? These vines evolve in a place, okay? And their biological clock is set by where they evolved. Now, I mean, Burgundy is the same latitude as Seattle, Washington, okay? So it's a grape from the north. It has a short growing season. And, well, guess what? Michigan's in the north too. So being from the north, it's also winter hardy. It can handle pretty cold weather. Well, we have cold weather in Michigan, so we can't really bother with grapes from the Mediterranean basin. We have to grow grapes that are coming from Northern Europe, where they've been selected over hundreds of years because they made it through the winters. Well, Burgundy, I figured, is in the north, and, you know, Pinot Noir should be hardy here. Well, it turns out Pinot Noir is hardy to 15 below zero. Nobody knew that. but I discovered it. So I realized right away, Pinot Noir is one of the grapes that'll do really well in Michigan. Now down here, we have the same climate as Burgundy and Bordeaux. We get 3,000 heat units during the growing season on average. Bordeaux gets 2,900 heat units. Burgundy gets 2,500 heat units. So we're slightly warmer than both Bordeaux and Burgundy in the summertime here. Anybody who's gone through a Michigan summer knows it gets pretty flipping hot in the summer here. We have plenty of heat to ripen those grapes, right? Getting through the winter, of course, is a little bit of a challenge because we do get colder than Bordeaux and Burgundy in the wintertime. But I figured if I can get them through the winter and I can grow them and then I make the wine exactly like the wines are made in Burgundy and Bordeaux, I should get a product that's similar, except it's going to taste like our terroir, not their terroir.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm not really interested in making a wine that you would totally confuse as a Bordeaux or Burgundy. I'm trying to make a wine that you would recognize is in the same class and the same quality level as those great wines, and yet has its own distinctive personality because of our terroir.
Yeah.
So basically what I've done is I've translated that great tradition from France over here to Southwest Michigan. And I only grow the grape varieties that will make world-class wine here. I don't want to bother with grapes that, make mediocre wine. I've got limited space in my cellar, and a barrel of Gamay takes the same amount of space as a barrel of Pinot Noir. I can get twice as much for Pinot Noir. So why would I love Gamay, don't get me wrong, but you can't get the price for it. Mm-hmm. So as a small businessman, I realized I would have to compete with the big boys in order to make it work, and I would have to command enough price on the bottle to where I could make the bill, pay my bills and survive as a business. That meant I had to take on the big boys, and so that's what I've done. Basically, my Bordeaux blend, tastes like a $300 bottle of Bordeaux. I sell it for $45. And people who are buying the $300 bottle of Bordeaux, when they taste my wine, they go, wow, this tastes just as good as that wine I just bought $300 a piece for, except it's from my home state. And they get excited about that. So that's kind of my little marketing shtick, is what I've tried to do is I've tried to say, hey, right here in Michigan, we can make world-class wine. And we don't have to be ashamed of anything,
Amen.
So that's kind of the way I've always approached it. And, when I started, there were only 15 wineries in the state of Michigan, and most of them were making sweet swill, and I shouldn't say that sounds pretty pejorative. I mean, they were trying to survive and make a wine that everybody liked. Okay. So, and at that time, people liked sweet wine, but, that was not the future of Michigan. Michigan's future is in fine wine and making some of the best wines in the world. So that's what I believe, and that's what I aim for. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I've tried to accomplish in my career, and I've been at it now for over 40 years, and I'm still going.
James, you say you have an original bottle still. Do you still have some original vines?
I have some very old, well, I don't have any old vines here. My original vineyard I ended up having to sell a few years ago. It was down in Buchanan, and I moved up just south of South Haven. It was just too far to travel and keep the vineyard. But yeah, in that vineyard, I've got some very old Cabernet vines, some very old Chardonnay vines, some very old Pinot Noir vines.
Is that to Max Eichberg in Sydney? Is that vineyard?
Yes, yeah, Max is on that vineyard now.
Okay.
Max was working for Cream Wine Company, which was my distributor in Chicago. Yeah. And that's how I met Max. And Max told me, Jim, I dream about being a vintner someday, and so his life, went through a couple of evolutions, and, I knew he was starting to look for vineyard land. He went out West Coast, first. And I said, Max, it's a pretty crowded field in the West Coast. And as a result of that, land prices are ridiculous. And I said, really, you ought to consider starting here in Michigan, where, it's the ground floor opportunity. You can still buy land for $5,000 an acre. And a guy like you can actually, own a winery, whereas in California, you got to be a millionaire,
right?
Even in Oregon. And so I said, you really ought to look around here. Well, he looked out on the West Coast, and sure enough, I kept in touch with him, and emailed, and pretty soon he was back in the Midwest. Sydney's from Chicago.
Okay.
And he was back in the Midwest, and he started throwing me, hey Jim, there's this vineyard site, potential vineyard site. Here's the coordinates. Would you mind going looking at it and give me your ideas? So I traveled a little bit south. He had a property in Watervliet he was looking at, and I looked at it. Looked at several places. Gave him my, hey, here's what I think of the place. And then he says, hey, he says, would you consider selling your vineyard down there in Buchanan? And I said, well, funny you should ask, because we've just decided we probably ought to sell it, because I just can't, it's too far away. I can't keep it up. As much as I hate to get rid of it, uh, I've got a new vineyard now, and so yeah, he said, okay, I want to buy it. So we made the deal, and he bought it, and so yeah, he's got the original vineyard now.
That's good. Yeah, I'm excited to see where they take that. He's making some really interesting low intervention wines that I've tasted
Right.
of his, at least. So
yeah, well, he's on a very steep learning curve, because Max has never really farmed anything, and he really he's helped out with a couple of harvests out in Oregon, but he's never really sort of had the full weight of having to grow the vines, bring the grapes to maturity, harvest the crop, make the wine, and then go out and market it. And so he's got a big tough road ahead of him, but he's got a lot of enthusiasm, and he's very knowledgeable, and everybody's rooting for him. We all want him to succeed. So and I told Max, I said, hey, anytime you need my advice or you want to pick my brains, I said, just give me a call. So
that's important. I think that's you probably find that anywhere in our industry, but it's one of the things that has attracted me for over 20 years to be in our industry, is that the camaraderie and the sharing of knowledge seems to be unlimited, no matter where you.
Is it Brian?
It is, yeah.
Brian. Yeah, Brian, I would say that unfortunately that's a recent development. When I got into the industry, there was a lot of competition and backbiting and a lot of big egos. And, luckily things have changed. I've done my best to try to change that, because I want everybody in Michigan to make better wine. I want us to have a real wine industry where people travel to Michigan to visit our wineries and buy wine, just like they do in California or Oregon, and Washington State. So that was, has been my goal, so I stay on friendly terms with all my colleagues, even the ones I disagree with, and, you're not going to have a whole lot of influence over somebody that you're mad at all the time, or talking behind their back. I mean, that's just, I'm sorry, there's no room in our industry for that. We, like any wine region, we need to band together and figure out what we can do, and do it as well as we can do it. And then that's going to help everybody. So, and yeah, I mean, I disagree with some of the trends and some of the, I think hybrids are the wrong direction to go, and there's a whole new group of wineries that are focused on hybrids, and it's like, okay, well, you can have a local market for hybrids, and your friends and neighbors will come and taste your wine, and they'll buy your wine, but you're not going to attract, international wine writers and people like that to come to Michigan to taste, your Marquette or your, and that's not to say those grapes are worthless. They're not, but they're never going to make as good a wine as Pinot Noir or Cabernet, or those grapes have proven themselves over hundreds of years. And if we can grow them here, then again, a barrel of Marquette takes up the same amount of space in my wine cellar as a barrel of Pinot Noir. And,
I agree wholeheartedly.
It's like my Pinot Noir tastes like $100 bottle of Burgundy, and you're not going to convince anybody that a Marquette's going to taste like $100 bottle of Burgundy. So there is a place for those grapes and those wines, but I don't think it's going to put Michigan on the fine wine map of the world. Yeah. And we have an opportunity to make great wine here, not just mediocre wine or even good wine from hybrids. We've got chances to make wines that are as good as some of the best wines in the world.
Yeah,
And
that's part
so,
of what we're trying to do here with our platform with Two Guys Tasting is basically expose and try to build a larger community by exposing them to different wine regions and
right,
different winemakers because everybody knows the big guys.
right.
And like I said before about Andre Houston Mack, he's constantly when he brings up Michigan wine, I'm always saying, who did you taste with? Because my top five, I guarantee you, if he was tasting wines from any of those wineries, he wouldn't be saying bad things about Michigan wine.
Right. Well, there's also a psychological factor, Chuck. Um, the psychological factor is that uh, people who love fine wine are very, 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 very conservative folks. They're not really going to believe that some unknown wine region like Michigan can produce a wine as good as their $300 bottle of white Burgundy or whatever, you know? And so there's an ego on the line there. And so to approach those kind of folks and say, yeah, you should try Michigan wine, you're going to hit a brick wall. They're not even going to give them a chance because you said the word Michigan. The only
Right.
way you can get them to take them seriously is if you pour them blind.
Mhm.
You know, that you say, okay, we're gonna taste 5 wines, and okay, we'll just take Pinot Noir for example. Okay, we're gonna taste 5 wines. Uh, 2 are from Burgundy, 2 are from top vineyards in Oregon, and 1 is from Michigan. And we're gonna taste them blind, and you're gonna tell me which one of these wines you think is the best wine, which one is the second best, which one's the third best. You know, rate them all. All right. And then we're going to take them out of the bag and you'll see which one you rated and how you rated them. And when they find out that they rated the Michigan wine number 2 or even number 1 or even number 3, they're going to have to they're going to have to admit to themselves that by gum, some Michigan wines are good enough to make the Olympics, you know. And once they realize that, then they're going to go, okay, I guess I was wrong. Michigan can make excellent wine, you know, but that's when you think about it, that's how the California industry got started. It was the
Sure.
Paris tasting of 76
Yep.
when the French picked the California wines as the best wines. That's what launched our multi-billion-dollar industry was that one tasting in France. All right. So you're up against some pretty conservative folks when you're in the fine wine business. And so in order to earn your chops, you've got to be growing the grapes, making the wine, doing the things that they do in the old world in the same similar terroir, and then saying, okay, now, you just spent, $800 on that bottle of Romane Conti or whatever it is. Well, it's not $800, it's 2,000 or 5,000 now, but,
Yeah.
and now, here's my $45 bottle of Pinot Noir from Southwest Michigan. Taste them right next to each other. And you tell me that other one is $1,000 better than mine, you know? Not that that's going to give us, giant cultural acceptance in Michigan, but it sometimes makes the point with these people that, think that no good wine can come from Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly helped in my world as well. The one thing that I would add to that though is that in fact today the most recent data that I read is that millennials have overtaken baby boomers as far as the lion's share of wine consumption in the United States. And knowing that baby boomers are primarily the fine wine crowd and that millennials have a mindset of not wanting to drink what their parents are drinking, I think we have a little bit of an easier road ahead of us to convince a new generation that Michigan is making quality wine. And
I
so the
agree.
first step is to make sure that you're making quality wine that tastes good. And and that's kind of the struggle right now is you're right. There's a lot of, even at Chateau Chantal, we grow 12 different vinifera. Most of them are cool climate. We just recently planted Tiraldigo from northern Italy, and that seems
That's
to
a
be
cool
faring
climate
well.
grape.
Yep. So we're doing well with those. And what we're seeing is that, those are the varieties that the younger generations are going for. Cabernet Sauvignon is old news to some of these younger generation or younger consumers. So that's the only thing I would add to that point.
Well, no, you're right that there, from a marketing standpoint, people have prejudices, people have notions. At the end of the day, whatever your notions and your prejudices are, those notions and prejudices have to be submitted to the realities of what just the sheer quality of the wine.
Yeah.
It's like you can claim all you want to that Marquette's going to make a better wine than a great Pinot Noir, and it's like, okay, you make the claim, let's line them up and let's taste them, and let's see. And I would say that if Marquette ever would make a wine better than Pinot Noir, then we had to plant Marquette because it's more winter hardy.
Sure.
The simple fact is, I haven't tasted a Marquette yet that comes even close to the best Pinot Noirs I've tasted. And so, you can have your prejudices and you can have your biases and everything else, but at the end of the day, it comes right down to, which wines have the best, most enduring, most incredible flavors. And, what you have in the old world is you have, 10,000 years of human experience.
Right.
Don't plant that grape, plant this one because it makes better wine. The chances that we're going to hybridize something and that's going to compete with that 10,000 years of experience is pretty slim, And so, yeah, okay. I happen to think Teraldigo is one of those grapes that is well deserves to be better known.
Yeah.
Very small amount of it planted in northern Italy, and that's the only place it grows. There's some planted in California now, but California is really too hot for that variety.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a grape variety that will do well in Michigan, because if you look where it comes from in Italy, we've got climates very similar here in Michigan. And again, the grapevine doesn't know whether it's growing in Italy or whether it's growing in Michigan. And so what we need to do is get smart enough to plant it in the right spots and then make the wine correctly so that it really is a beautiful wine. And so we've got some work to do there. But to say Cabernet is old news, yeah, it's been old news for about 600 years, my friend. So you can say that, but anything that can last for 600 years and command the price that wine, the best of that commands, is worthy of paying attention to. And if we can grow it and make a wine even close to that here in Michigan, then we got to take it seriously. So that's why I take it seriously, and that's why it's probably my number one selling red wine. So and I do a blend like they do in Bordeaux. I've never made 100% Cabernet Sauvignon because it makes a better wine as a blend, just like it does in Bordeaux. So
Jim, I wanted to introduce you to our screenwriter and our third, which is Ken Williams.
Hey, Ken.
He's down here in Detroit with me.
Yes.
But
I see you over there, Ken.
Yeah, his
how
wife,
you doing?
if you remember Jim, if you remember my group, the Mahogany Tasters, his wife was one of the founders with me.
Excellent.
So he was brought in by his beautiful wife Erica.
All right.
And
where I first met Chuck.
Yeah, and we
She's
basically
prettier than you as she can.
Oh, I'm sorry. Say that again, Jim.
I said she's prettier than you, huh?
Yeah, very, very, very much prettier. Very much prettier, and yeah. Sorry for my tardiness. For some reason, when it comes to these Zoom conversations, I seem to be the late one here. I was actually out getting dinner for the family, and
shame on you.
I was out getting dinner from the family, and they didn't have my order ready when I picked it up, so had to feed the family first before I logged on here.
We're happy to have you.
So, and yeah, every time I do these, I just sit back and listen because it's definitely a good education for me in the world of wine and spirits, wine specifically. And I always tell this story, as the novice here of the group, is that when I first met my wife, I didn't drink wine at all. I was usually probably like most guys, drinking liquor and never had a bottle of wine in my life until she told me about the mahogany taster she was in. So that's where I got introduced to wine. And the very first wine I started drinking was St. Julian. That was the one that my wife had turned me on to. It was I can't remember the name of it. Was Blue something. I can't remember. It was Blue
Blue
something.
Heron.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
Blue
what it
Heron,
was.
right.
Yeah, so I got hooked on wine since then. So ever since that time, I've definitely stepped up my game. But listening to the experts like you, Jim, and Brian, Chuck, I'm still a novice in this game here. But yeah, like Chuck said, yeah, I'm a screenwriter, film producer here. Um, I actually met Brian at a wine tasting that Chuck was doing with him. I would say, what, maybe like a year and a half ago now, I think.
Yep.
And we just got to talking about film production and doing some kind of content involving wine and education. So since that time, we've been brainstorming and talking and collaborating on ultimately what we wanted to do. So we came up with the concept of two guys tasting. And our main goal is to shoot a TV show, kind of like in the realm of Man versus Food, kind of like a wine version of it, where it stars Chuck and Brian. They're the main talent, and we'll go to different wineries starting here in Michigan, where similar to Man versus Food, you have the host go to these different restaurants and he samples different food from that restaurant, and then um, ultimately the host ends up at doing some kind of contest or feast or something to win the prize of that restaurant. So it's kind of in that vein where we'll go to different wineries. Chuck and Brian will do their thing and tasting different wines, and they'll select their favorite ones. And then at the end of the show, we'll go to a restaurant where we have like a Chuck versus Brian wine off with that restaurant, and then the owner and their staff will pick, the best wine to present, or to present, at their establishment, and then we'll kind of take like a tally between Chuck and Brian, who's winning, who's losing, and that's pretty much the show concept. So this is like the beginning of it, doing these different, podcasts like interviews that we post on our social media with experts such as yourself. And once we get to shooting the show, we'll definitely have you back on and all the other people that we've interviewed, to really show off, the expertise of the wine industry here in Michigan. So, that's what the brainchild is for our concept.
Yeah, because the streaming series is going to be broken up. The first season was going to be Michigan, so we were going to go to each AVA and do 3 wineries in each AVA, and then pick a restaurant. Like I know in Fenville, it would probably be Salt of the Earth, where we would taste around Fenville in that area, Modalis, and probably Finn Valley, and taste around, and then showcase the particular vineyards, the winemakers, but also let people get to know the regions and the areas.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
that sounds pretty ambitious.
It is. It
Yeah.
really is. But it's something that I think starting to build our following, our audience is what we're at the stage of right now. And as you know, it's all, social media and internet related these days. So once we have a groundswell of awareness, then I think that we can take that awareness to the next level. Or who knows, maybe we won't. Maybe we'll get lucky and be on YouTube or something, and people will find us there. But it's certainly there's two things in my view, and I think Chuck and Ken share the same thing. One is to raise awareness and bring exposure to what we're doing in our state. And number two is to build community, because I think there's many people that feel that they need to connect in one way or another these days outside of politics, and showing people this platform that we can actually join together. And I've told many people, wine is the one single drink. I believe wine is the one single drink that is intrinsically shared, and something that you either share with friends, family, meals, sunsets, music, and it's something that can bring a community together. So that's the point of this. And what we'll do is we'll chop this up and put it on our social medias and share with your social medias if you're interested, and try to expand our audience. So. Yeah.
Because our Instagram page now, when we say we're trying to build community, if you look at our Instagram page now, it is a nice mixture of just regular people, but also chefs and winemakers from all over the world. So we've been able to, and that's what I've been trying to do, is cultivate that and build that as a platform, primarily because, it's about food, wine, and fellowship. That I believe that's what this community is, what we're trying to build it on, is to cut through a lot of the anger and vitriol, just with the fact that there is common ground for all of us. And sometimes the common ground is a bottle of wine or a good plate of food.
Yeah.
And
we all have to eat and drink to stay alive.
That's right. Yes, happy belly. So tell us, since we will be online here, James, where would we purchase some of your wine? Where would someone find it in retail, or do they come to your tasting room?
Yeah, I used to do a lot of business with restaurants, and then COVID hit, and I thought I was out of business, because all the restaurants closed. But a lot of my private customers started calling me up and saying, especially out of Chicago, they'd say, man, we're dying to get out of the city. Can we just come out in the countryside and hang out with you, and bring some of my friends along. We want to get out of the city. And I said, well, yeah, come on out. And so since then, I think we've pretty much focused on direct to consumer sales. Being a small winery, that's the most profitable way to do it anyway. I do have a distributor in Chicago. I do have a distributor for the state of Michigan, but I would say that about 70% of our business is direct to consumer, and about 30% is through distributors. So the distributors, of course, you have to discount your wine by half to sell to the distributor. So it's not near as profitable. And to make it worthwhile to deal with distributors, you have to be a good sized winery. And so, yeah, we've been focusing on direct to consumer mostly. We have an online wine shop at our website. And, we do tours from April 15 to September 15. I do the tours myself. We happen to live on a beautiful property, which Chuck can tell you has been here.
Oh my God.
So it's really, really nice to come visit here and taste the wines, catch a piece of the beautiful serenity of West Michigan. And, it's just, we live in a beautiful state, and people, buy the wine and they join my wine club. And that's kind of been, the direction we've been pushing our marketing. But we've got club members, in 4 or 5 different states. So, the word's getting out, and being a small business like I am, every bottle counts in how I sell it. So, that's why we've been focusing more on direct to consumer. But no, I believe the restaurant trade needs to get on board. Imagine going to California and going to a fancy restaurant in downtown San Francisco and not finding any California wine on the wine list.
Same.
Right?
Agree.
Now you go to Michigan all the beer taps, there's half the beer taps are Michigan brews. Look at
Mm-hmm.
the wine list.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, maybe there's Mobby, maybe there's Chateau Grand Traverse Late Harvest Riesling. That's it.
Yep. Amen.
It's a shameful thing. And so, yeah, we've got a lot of work to do with our restaurant trade, but the restaurants, they'll stock Michigan wine if people coming in the front door are asking for it.
Correct.
And so the problem is we haven't done a good job of getting people excited about the quality of Michigan wine so that they're going into the restaurant asking for Michigan wine. And so really we've got to do a lot more grassroots work in getting the word out to the person on the street, you know, that, hey, right here in your own backyard, you know, you're living in a fine wine region.
Yeah.
And, you know, why are you sending your dollars to the West Coast? Why are you sending your dollars all the way over to Europe? You know, lucky for us, you know, the younger generation has really bought into the idea of local is best, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it costs a lot of money to ship a case of wine across the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's 50 pounds per case, you know, and they're sending pallets of wine from Europe all the way over here. We could be putting them on a barge and sending them across the lake to Chicago instead of having them bring all the way from Italy or France, you know? So, the word has to get out to the man on the street, really is what is our big job, is to get people on the street excited about the quality of our wine. And, you know, that's, you know, restaurants can help with that. But my experience with restaurants is that they don't have the time to go out and hand sell your wine. They'll put it on their list and you'll sell some bottles, but that's a very, very, very slow way to get the word out to the street. So we've really got to do a lot better job of alerting our Michigan consumers that we're making excellent wine. And so whatever that's going to take, you know, to get people to understand that and start buying local. But the buy local is becoming a big movement. And particularly with the young people, I'm finding the people who visit me, voting with your dollars, keeping your dollars local, you know, supporting your local farms, supporting your local, you know, quality producers is very important to a lot of people these days. So I think that's a really good way to go. But people shouldn't just buy our wine because it's local. They should buy it because it's excellent and local.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, the whole industry in general has got to just work really hard at upping the quality of what we do, and simultaneously marketing that quality to the people that are right here in our own backyard. If we could get, you know, if we could get 20%, Michigan wines as 20% of all the wine lists on all the restaurants in the state of Michigan, we'd quadruple our business. You know, why do they have wines from South America and, you know, South Africa, and, you know, it's like, wait a minute, you know, how many petrodollars are we spending, and how much pollution are we putting into the planet to ship that wine all the way across the ocean? Think about that. You know, it's really green to buy local.
It's true.
You know?
We
but you got to have the quality to convince them that it's worth doing, you know?
Yeah.
Well, we have one spot. We have one spot in downtown Detroit that only serves Michigan wine, and I think what they're doing is they are literally one glass at a time showing the quality of Michigan wine. Right. And what I'm hoping is that it catches on with the other restaurants, because Brian will tell you we tried to do something through the collaborative, and we did a Taste Michigan Invades the D, which is we partnered with a number of restaurants in downtown Detroit who basically hosted a different Michigan winery in their restaurant for this one weekend. And when we were approaching restaurants like San Morello, which we figured would be all in, we also had to realize that the hospitality company that runs them is actually out of Brooklyn. So, wow. So they're not as focused on Michigan products as maybe some of these other hospitality companies. And that's the one thing that I think that we're building the relationship with through Two Guys Tasting is some of these local chefs. Because in fact, I do something like every 2 months called the Vital Tasting, where the chefs pair. They do a 6-course meal, and the theme is either an album or an artist, and then each course is themed based upon something in the album or something tied to the artist. Then they bring in where you can buy a separate package of wines that are curated for each course. And this last November was the first time we literally poured 2 Michigan wines. We poured a Cab Franc Rosé from a new winery in Detroit called Drew Ryan, and we poured a Gewürztraminer from that's being produced. The wine producer is a young lady that, well, basically both of the people I mentored. These are people that came into the wine business because they think I know a little something. And to be able to pour their wines at an industry event and hear people say these are amazing products, that they weren't, these were made in Michigan.
Yeah.
A Cab Franc Rosé and a Gewürztraminer. Go, yeah. So the word, what we're hoping from this platform is the word will get out about Michigan wine. And because of how Brian and I view this and bringing in Ken, the bottom line is, like you said, you have to blind them side by side. And if you blind them side by side, and then you can't say that one is just not as good as the others, you then have to admit, well, dang, we were pouring a Pinot Noir from California, one from Burgundy, and yours from here in Michigan, and they're going, well, all 3 of these are damn good.
Liquid to lips. That's the man.
What can you say then?
Right. Well, in the high end of the market, there's also a factor, what I call the show-off factor. My wine might be as good as a $300 bottle of Bordeaux, but if you go to dinner at that guy's house, he's more likely to pull out his $300 bottle of Bordeaux to his guests than he is my wine, even though he might like my wine better, because he wants to show off to his guests, hey, I can
prestige.
I can afford this, and you're drinking Opus One or whatever, and everybody goes, ooh, and so there's a sociological factor in marketing as well, that what you might call status. There's this, people will pay a lot of money for status. It's amazing,
Absolutely. We've got, that's how our ice wine sells.
Yeah. And there's something about that really rubs me the wrong way,
Yep.
To me, wine is an art form, and when you get human egos involved in all this status and all this, what I consider marketing BS, kind of makes me mad, because it really clouds the joy of enjoying a really good wine,
Yes.
But nevertheless, it's a factor, so I think Michigan could do well to polish its image a tiny bit, in terms of, we are producing wines as good as other famous producing wine regions in the world, and we're relatively sophisticated about it, because I think it's been a little bit too mom and pop sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for those consumers at the higher end, that are going to take us seriously, and once they take us seriously, then all their friends will follow along. It's really weird, because we all know somebody who's like, in our social circle, if you're doing a dinner and you don't know what to pair with, call that guy. He'll tell you the wine to pair with it, And most people have a guy in their social circle that they consider their wine expert. And if we can figure out a way to get all those wine experts in those social circles to go gung-ho over Michigan wine, I think that would have a huge trickle-down effect,
Yeah. Well, two guys tasting is, like I said, building that community where we have, I think, 3 fairly nationally known sommeliers that are in the group.
Nice.
And So
Who are
and
they?
one of, pardon?
Who are the sommeliers?
Well, one of them, his name is Derek Westbrooks. I know he's in the group. I think he's based out of Chicago. I'd have to take a look and find the other two. But we have some people in the group right now that, and in fact, one of my mentees is out in Napa now. He got a full ride out of Napa College for enology.
Nice.
And he is hobnobbing with the D. Lynn Proctors, the Carlton McCoys, and he's already said that he's building those relationships for me and Brian. So
That's very good.
that's the ultimate goal, and I say it right now. It's about it's about an 8 to 12 month window because Antonius has been wanting to sit down for a minute to organize something that we could set up here to bring those guys into Detroit and pour Michigan wine for them.
Yeah, we've got big plans, James. We've been talking about having a Great Lakes Wine Food Festival to not only showcase what we're doing as far as the adult beverage industry is concerned, but what our culinary scenes are doing around the state as well.
Right.
And some of the inspiration is to get all of those people in the same space and build those relationships so that, you know, when it comes across their desk, oh, Brian from Chateau Chantal or James Lester from Marland Wyncroft is going to be in town this weekend. You know, they make it a point to have some Michigan wine in their space. That's the hope, but I can't say that I don't know how close we are. We've tried to reach out to frankly, we reached out to our media and asked them to partner with us because you've seen these wine and food festivals, you know, the Aspen Wine and Food Show and these magazines that are, you know, putting all of these big orchestrated events together and getting these celebrities. You know, Traverse City tried to do it in August. I'm not sure what impact that had, but my belief is for Michigan wine to win, we have to win Detroit. And if we can influence the city of Detroit, that's going to have exponential effect because by sheer population density is going to have an exponential effect. So that's where my head's at in this whole thing.
Yeah, no, I think yes, Detroit obviously it's the largest market in the state and a very important market. And then, you know, here on the west side, you know, I'd say Grand Rapids would be corollary town to how Detroit is in the east. I mean, it's obviously a smaller town, but it's an important town. It's got a lot of influence, you know. And, you know, one of the things that I'd like to see people emphasize is the looking at the amazing variation of climates that we've got going up the western lakeshore.
Yeah.
I mean, at the very bottom where our state touches Indiana, we have the same number of heat units there as the Rhone Valley of France. We're talking Chateauneuf-du-Pape, okay? Now, unfortunately, the Rhone varieties don't make it through our winters very well. But we have the heat units that are equal to what they have in the Rhone Valley in the Southwest. You go all the way to the tip of the mitt, and now you're in Germany. You know, you're in a climate. So in our state, we have almost every single microclimate that's in the country of France. You know, down in the Southwest, you know, we can make big reds. You get up to the north, you know, we make more Germanic style whites. We make you know, beautiful bubbly wines. You know, and I think it's important to recognize, again, if you think of this from the standpoint of the vine itself, we need to have our growers. Hang on a second. It's my son calling. Hello. Okay, I'll open up. Sorry.
Yeah, that when you go to the estate to see the vines and to see the operation, to me, it is literally like going into another country. When you go through the gates at the estate, it's like being in Bordeaux. I'm sorry. It is the way you wind up to the house, and then you see the vines, and he has the pond.
Yeah, all of that
It
is
is
all of that is really beautiful, Chuck. There's no question about it. But you know what? At the end of the day, the truth is in the glass.
oh, but
You know.
as I told you, Jim, when me and my wife came up there, and she's not the true wine drinker in the family, but
Uh-huh.
after the tour, and we started tasting, she would lean over to me and say, "We got to have that bottle. We got to have that bottle. We got to have that bottle." And so I know for a fact that your wines convert people because of how they're made. When you had, I think you had that Simeon and the Acacia barrel
Yeah.
down in the cellar,
Yeah.
and it had been sitting on the lees for I don't know how long. But when you brought it uh, out of the barrel, and it was crystal clear and just amazing flavor.
Yeah.
You can't deny the artistry and the love that you put into your wine. That's the reason why you will always be the number one winemaker for me in this state.
Well, thank you.
Because you taste you're basically like a small batch bourbon producer. You're
Yeah.
you're putting so much into, you're saying 3,000, was it 3,000 cases?
Yes, mostly, often less than that.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, as I've always told people, if you're drinking wine that is mass produced and you pour it next to a wine where that you can actually taste the care and the time that was put into it,
Right.
you'll kind of, yeah, I kind of like that one, but this one is amazing.
Yeah. Well, so the same is true of any art form. But food's the same way when you think about it. If you're eating something from somebody's garden that grew it and took care of it and then prepared it for you, there's nothing like that. There's no restaurant that can even duplicate that. So
Love is an ingredient, that's for sure.
well, it's part of terroir, isn't it?
Yeah. And also what Jim told me when I went out there is that you are you biodynamic or organic? I know you're not putting it on the bottles, but I don't believe you use any pesticides or anything out there, right?
Well, those are kind of slippery concepts, because when somebody says they're organic, I always say, well, what does that mean? You know, I don't like buzzwords. I like definitions. So if somebody says, well, I'm organic, I always say, well, what do you mean by organic? And same with biodynamic. These are words that are thrown around in our industry. And it's like I always want people to define it. What do you mean by that? Uh, but whatever, the main thing is that when you grow a crop, you want to put all your effort into making sure that your soil is healthy, that anything that you're doing to grow that plant is going to be for the benefit of that plant, so that the plant can produce the most flavorful and wonderful and nutritious crop that it can produce. And so, yeah, we put a lot of effort into all of our farming and everything. We try to be extremely conscientious in how we do things.
And your biodiversity on your property is, I think, way more diverse than a number of other properties
Oh
in
yeah,
what you have growing alongside your
right,
vines.
right. Oh yeah, no, we're we're big on that for sure. So, um, but yeah, I mean, minimal intervention. Obviously, farming itself is an unnatural act. Okay, there's no place in nature where you're going to see something growing in a row. you know, and nothing else growing except what you plant, what's growing in that row, you know. So it's important to understand that all farming is somewhat artificial, you know. But having said that, once you put it in a row, you want to make sure that your soil is healthy. You want to make sure that that plant is healthy. You want to make sure that the sun is getting to the leaves to produce the sugars. You want to make sure that the clusters are spaced apart so that they're not bumping into each other and causing mildew problems and that sort of thing, you know. So there's a lot to it that people don't realize, you know, a lot.
Yeah. Well, we're at the 9 o'clock mark. We generally only do this for an hour, Jim. But as I will explain to people, if you reserve an appointment at Wyncroft Marland to go for a tour and a tasting, please set aside 3 or 4 hours. Because you will get.
It's supposed to be only 2 hours.
All I can tell you is we got caught up.
Yeah.
And when he starts going over what's in this plot, what's in that plot, and I said the biodiversity, you know, when you see plants that you didn't think, I mean, I'm not talking about grapes, when you see plants that you think weren't growing in Michigan and they're on his property, you're going, oh, this, you know, it when they talk about terroir, Jim, your estate is the grapes that come from your estate are blessed, and you make blessed wine. So,
well, thank you.
But I want to thank you, Jim. This is an honor for me to talk to you, and I just want you to know whatever we can do to help Wyncroft Marland get farther, especially here in the Detroit market, the Grand Rapids market. We're here. Just let us know what we can do.
Thank you very much.
We will try. Thanks for your time today, James. It's a pleasure to meet you formally.
Great to meet you too, Brian, and you too, Ken.
Yeah, wait. Before we go, quick question.
Sure.
I think I found your website. I was looking at your website here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it WyncroftWine.com?
It's actually pronounced Wyncroft.
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 Okay.
So yeah, WyncroftWine.com. That's my website.
Okay, I'm looking at it now. I actually have I don't know if you can see my phone.
No.
Okay. No. Well,
I'm looking at the Wyncroft. Is it and if I butchered this, I apologize. The 2022 Wyncroft, is it Shou? SHOU?
Show.
It's pronounced show.
Show LePage Estate Vineyard for $45.
Ken.
Yes, that's
Ken,
that's
the
my
red
Bordeaux blend.
Yeah. Okay. Ken, the red and the white are. I still have that bottle that we bought when we came out there.
Oh,
I'm not.
wow, okay.
That's going to be a special occasion.
Okay.
But tasting it. I'm drinking a Bordeaux tonight from Caillou Bel Air, and
nice.
And it's like, nah, I'll drink the show. I'll drink the show.
That's very kind.
It will blow you away that it's $45. And it's from Michigan. It will blow you away.
There we go.
Can you pair this with a good hamburger, Brian?
Of course. Absolutely.
That's a hamburger. That's
how about
a really good filet?
Yeah.
Spaghetti.
Rack of lamb.
Yeah. No, it is just a beautiful wine. And when I've poured it for people, we had people come from out of town when I was with House of Pure Vin. And when we had it, we did have it in our automated machines.
Right.
And so when people would come in, I'd go, "Oh, you want to taste something special?" And I'd pour that for them and just let them taste it. And I wouldn't say anything. And if we had any on the shelves when I poured it for them, those bottles were gone. because the minute they tasted it and they were like going, and they make this in Michigan? Yep. And it's $45? Yep. Because they tasted the quality.
Well,
That's
So-
that's magic. So thanks for your time tonight, James, and
Thanks,
hopefully
Brian.
we can
Great to
catch
meet-
up with
great to
you
meet you,
sometime
you know.
soon.
Yes, pleasure to meet you.
Are you associated with Chateau Chantal? Did I understand?
Yes, I'm the vice president of Chateau Chantal. I've been
Oh.
there for over 20 years,
Oh wow!
and so I'm very familiar with many Michigan chapters. We
Yeah.
could say.
Is the winemaker is Brian still there?
Yeah, Brian Hosmer still with us.
Hosmer?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Still with us,
Give
and
my warm regards to Brian.
absolutely will. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll see him tomorrow and let him know that that we spoke and give him your regards.
He and his wife came
Kristen.
to visit us years and years and years ago, and actually stayed an extra day just to hang out and talk, and it was just a wonderful time. And I've always had a soft spot for him. So
Well,
please give
good.
my warm regards.
Good. He needs people like you because he's an odd duck. I'm just kidding.
I need people like him. Yeah, exactly. Well, a good night to all of you, and have a blessed Christmas. Okay.
You too.
Thanks,
Thank you
Jim.
so much.
Same to you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Yep, take it easy.
So, guys, Brian, you got to meet Jim Lester. And he's going to say the tour is only 2 hours. Even Salisbury from If Vines Could Talk said, yeah, 3 or 4 hours later. Because you get caught if you're into wine and you're sitting there with Jim, it's just going. Time. I looked at my watch. I said, "Damn, we've been here for 3 hours." And but his property is amazing. That's the reason why I really wanted, when we started talking about this, I kept thinking about showing off his property on our series so that people could just go, they can do that in Michigan?
Yeah.